right, so we're starting off with June 2014. I know it's an old past paper. It's an HSB past paper, right? But it's still valid till today. Get started, guys. You're gonna try the questions first, and also when we're doing the questions, I'm gonna do revision mixed into the questions. Me doing past papers is just an excuse to revise the entire syllabus. So, guys, and when you're sending the answers today, do me a favor. If it's A, write A and your answer. If it's B part 1, write B part 1 and your answer. So I can keep track of the answers, okay? Good luck, and you have about 2 to 3 minutes to start providing answers on the chat. So part A wants 2 other ways other than unprotected sex that transmits HIV. Now, there are about 3, where one of them is a kind of gray area, but I know HIV can spread via the use of needles, via blood. So remember, a few weeks ago, I was discussing like drug addicts. They usually share needles to share their drugs. And obviously, when you push the syringes in their arms and whatnot, the blood gets what? Or on the needles. And of course, if that person has HIV and gives the needle to another drug addict, and they insert the same needle in their arms, the HIV virus can spread via blood transfusions, right? So sharing of needles, definitely one of them. I know some of you all might state it different. You might say blood or blood transfusions or whatnot, but sharing needles will work, okay? And vertical transmission, I'm using a very, how you say, a big term there, vertical transmission. Remember, vertical transmission is the transmission of something from mother to child while the mother is what? Pregnant. That's vertical transmission. By the way, if there's something called vertical transmission, there should be something called horizontal transmission, right? Remember, vertical is like this, up, down, where it's transmitted, but it's supposed to be the mom here. Let's draw the mom here, right? Where it's passed vertically downwards from the mother to the child, right? What is horizontal transmission? Anybody can give me an example of what horizontal transmission is? Obviously, it doesn't deal with transmission from a mother to a child. Right? From a husband to a wife, that's also what? Horizontal transmission, right? Like if the husband is infected, and has unprotected sex with his wife, that's horizontal transmission. But what about sharing needles? Isn't that horizontal transmission too? If you have 2 drug addicts and one shares his infected needle with the other one, that's also a case of horizontal transmission. Okay, great. B, let's see what's going on here. Acquired immune deficiency syndrome, better known as AIDS, is caused by the HIV virus, right? What's the name of the cell it affects? Well, it's the white blood cells. It starts to affect the white blood cells. But you want to be very specific. And I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Remember, there are 2 types of, well, 2 main categories of white blood cells. One called the lymphocyte, and the other one is called the phagocyte. I just want to test your memory. Which one eats the invader? Like let me say that your body gets infected with the HIV virus. Which one will try to eat, like physically eat the HIV virus? Is it the lymphocyte or is it the phagocyte? Which one tries to physically eat the virus? Nicole, correct. Alexander, correct. Sarah, correct. Rosita, wrong. The phagocyte is the one that tries to eat the virus or bacteria or whatnot, or the pathogen. The pathogen is the bad guy. The lymphocytes are a little bit more sophisticated. The lymphocyte goes up to the virus and investigates the virus and learns about the virus. He's sophisticated. And when he learns enough about the virus, he will develop something called antibodies and send the antibodies to destroy the pathogen. But believe it or not, there are different types of lymphocytes. And one type of lymphocyte is called the CD4 plus T cells. The HIV virus specifically attacks those types of lymphocytes cells. And what are two signs or symptoms of AIDS? Now, I already prepared these answers. Signs you have plenty to choose from, by the way, from the table I gave you. Swollen lymph nodes or a rash. Those are signs. These signs are physical things that you can actually see and interpret. Like you could actually feel your lymph nodes being swollen, and you can actually count the amount of lymph nodes swollen. A rash, you can physically see a rash, and from the rash, there are many different types of rashes, but from a rash, you could see it, describe it, and infer what the rash is caused by. Symptoms are things that cannot be experienced by the doctor. Instead, symptoms are usually described by the patient, and it usually cannot be measured. Like muscle aches. If you were to complain about muscle aches, I have no way of measuring how much pain you are experiencing, right? And I cannot see that or experience that pain for you, or even interpret the pain properly. And also tiredness. Tiredness is something that's experienced by the patient. A doctor cannot feel your fatigue or see your fatigue, right? So know the difference between a sign and a symptoms. And you all actually have definitions from your notes for a sign and a symptom. All right, so let's move on. There's no need to write down the questions today. You just provide an answers because the entire class is being recorded. Let's move on. Right, so part C. Both gonorrhea and syphilis can be transmitted by unprotected sex. Well, gonorrhea and syphilis are both what? STDs, which can infect a person. Why are these diseases referred to as venereal? And AIDS is not considered to be venereal. Without Googling it, let me see what you all can come up with. First of all, you have to ask yourself, what is a venereal disease? Venereal, whenever you hear the word venereal, right, it usually means it's caused by sexual activity, right? So if a disease is classified as venereal, that means usually or mainly it can be only spread by sexual activity. Now, that's true about gonorrhea and syphilis. They are usually only transmitted by sexual activity. But does AIDS fall in that category? Or does even HIV fall in that category? The answer is no. We all know AIDS and HIV. They should already put the word HIV here, right? Remember, AIDS and HIV are different. HIV causes AIDS story to be created. But we just learned from the previous question that HIV or AIDS is not only caused by sexual activity. It can be caused by the sharing of needles. It can also be caused by vertical transmission. So it's not fair to call AIDS a venereal disease. But this is my official answer here, right? Give it a read and let me know when you are finished reading my answer. All right, so every once in a while, this is going to come up, right? So I'm using this method to try to what encourage people from take part in class, and this is a funny way of doing it, right? So for the people who are not participating in class, there will be three people to try to encourage them, right? So the following people will be locked in that cage there, and hopefully they will participate in class later on. Right. So Otley, you need to start participating more in class. You'll be placed in the cage. Kyle, you need to start participating more in class, please. All right. Let me know in the chat there if you'll be participating more in class, right? You need to start providing answers, right? So, and I need one more person. I think Makella, right? You need to start participating more in class, right? Don't get too offended. This is just a comical way of trying to get people to participate in class. All right. So let's move on. Right. So every once in a while, GB is going to pop up. And we're going to take a little sidestep from the past paper to do some quick revision before we move on with the revision. So let's see what GB is telling us here. On the next slide is a summary of AIDS and HIV. However, I spelled something wrong here. There is one mistake on the table, and I want to know if you all can spot it. But here's the thing. I want you to close your notebooks, and I want you all to spot the mistake on this table. This is a table I gave you all not too long ago that describes basically everything about HIV. Without looking in your books, spot the mistake and describe it to me on the chat. Read it through carefully. It's a very slight mistake. The error here is this. You all notice I switched the signs and symptoms. I'm circling it there. This here is supposed to be here, and this is supposed to be here, right? Things like muscle aches and fatigue are symptoms. Those are things that the patient experiences, and the doctor can't really experience it or even measure it. So that was a mistake, guys. The signs and symptoms, or the two things that are circled there, should be switched, right? So most people are actually saw it, right? Everything else is 100% correct. All right. So, and remember, for the exam, you need to learn off the table by heart. I know it's a lot, but you have to invest some time into remembering it. All right. So let's move on. All right. All right. So I'm going to read this question, and I am going to draw the graph for you. But give the question a read, and this is more of a maths question where they actually make you draw a graph. Let me know when you finish reading, and I will show you my answer. On the grid provided in figure 1, construct a bar graph of the number of deaths due to AIDS from table 1. Right, so on the x-axis, we're going to put what? The country. So the countries are going to go on the x-axis, right? And on the y-axis, the values of the deaths of AIDS are going to be there. So this is the graph I came up with, right? Now, I didn't put in the countries, but I'm going to put it in here now, right? I'll just abbreviate it. Like if it's the Bahamas, I'll put TB, right? This is Barbados. This is Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Jamaica, and TNT, right? Now, in the exam, you're going to have to write out the full words. You're going to have to write it out. You can't abbreviate it, obviously, in the exam. Does everyone agree with my diagram? Look at it. For the Bahamas, it's supposed to be around 50. The bar graph went up close to 50, between 0 and 100. For Haiti, it's how much? 710. For Haiti, Look here, 700, and the bar graph is a little higher than 700. So that's 710. So let me know on the chat. Are you in agreement with my bar chart? Great. Right. So you get 3 marks for drawing that chart. Between me and you, I think you deserve more than that, right? I think you deserve at least 5 marks for drawing that. All right, so let's move on to the other part of the question. Yeah, 3 is ready too a little bit for that. All right. Part D, you have how much parts here? Part 2, part 3, and part 4. Please provide some answers on the chat. Which country has the highest number of persons living with AIDS? And the answer for that one is Haiti. Everyone got that correct? Part 3, which country has the lowest number of deaths due to AIDS? And that's Barbados. You can see it from the table, right? Now, if you look at in part 4, they're trying to compare who? The Bahamas with Cuba. Both of them have roughly the same amount of people living with AIDS, roughly. But the Bahamas has 50 deaths and Cuba only has 15. Now, in case you didn't know, right? Cuba apparently has a very good healthcare system. I'm sure you all have heard that by word of mouth that the best doctors usually come from where? Cuba. All right. The reason for this is Cuba might have a better healthcare system and all not only a good healthcare system. Well, a good healthcare system means there should be what? The availability of drugs to help deal with HIV. So this was my answer, right? And most people were on the correct track. They just didn't say it exactly like how I said it. But a lot of people did say, well, the healthcare system is good. Some people said that Cuba has good doctors, but I don't want you to say it like that in the exam. Try to phrase it a little bit, technical for them. Right? Right, so let's move on. E, the economy of some countries depend heavily on tourism, right? So some countries, like for example, Barbados depends heavily on tourism. The Bahamas depends heavily on tourism. Suggest one effect that a high incidence of AIDS would have on these countries. So imagine this. Let's say that you wanted to go on vacation in the Bahamas. We all know the Bahamas is renowned for their very nice beaches and whatnot, right? But then you hear on the news, right, that it has a very high rate of HIV or AIDS, right? Let's say there's an outbreak of it on the island. Would you still go? I mean, some people might still go, but you have to admit that you might be a little reluctant to go. So, and in cases like that, right? Well, it's a kind of a stigmatism, right? The country gets branded as a bad place to have a vacation. And obviously, the tourism will decline and the economy of the country will be affected. So let's see my answer for this one. Right? So the country will develop a perception and a stigma. HIV/AIDS can contribute to negative perceptions and stigmatizations of certain destinations or populations. Travelers may have concerns about the prevalence of HIV in a particular region, leading to a decrease in tourism. Obviously, my answer can be rephrased a million different ways, right? But I trust everyone in the class gets the gist of my answer, right? For example, is there any country that you know from watching news and whatnot? It doesn't have to be a sexually transmitted disease. Is there any country that you know of that you would not visit because you think it have an outbreak of a certain disease? Let me know in the chat. Is there any particular country? All right, so Jimmy is here with us again to help us revise. So the slide above dealt with the effects of HIV and AIDS on a country. But diseases can impact a country in many ways, right? Now, in the last slide, it spoke about diseases affecting the economy, the amount of money coming into the country. But diseases can what? Affect a country plenty other ways. Do you all think you all can come up with 5 ways from memory, not from going to your books, because your books will have the answers. I gave you the answer for this a few weeks ago. On your own, come up with 5 ways diseases can affect a country. You don't have to describe it. You can just list it in point form, the headings of it. Let's see how much of the 5 you can come up with. The first one is economic impact. That one was obvious, right? That was from the previous slide. It definitely affects the economy of a country. Number 2, education. I think it was only 2 weeks ago we had mentioned this one. Diseases can impact the educational system, and we saw that during COVID-19. All physical classes were what? Moved to online classes. That's a big disruption there, right? And that's just one example. Healthcare infrastructure. Once again, think about COVID-19, how overburdened the hospitals were. They were full. They couldn't find extra beds. They didn't have enough beds, in fact, right? Stigmatization, right? It's very easy to classify a country as a bad country to go to because they have some outbreak of a certain type of diseases, whether it be an STD or something like E. coli, right? Countries can get a very bad name. Stigmatization. Migration, and only 2 people mentioned migration or on the answers today, right? If a country has a huge outbreak in a certain disease, right, you will find people leaving the country, not in small amounts, but by the hundreds of thousands sometimes. Sometimes you just want to go to a different country where it has a better healthcare system to deal with that particular disease. All right, so for the exam, I know I say this over and over. You have to memorize the entire slide with the wordings and everything properly. All right, so let's move on. So we're on question 2 now. We have just finished question 1 in June 2014. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you will see that we are on question 2 now. Good luck. Send your answers for A part 1 and A part 2. You have 5 minutes. A is the nucleus for sure. B, I know some people are going to get this one wrong, right? This one here, unfortunately, this is one of those questions, right? That, care what? Remember, this is an old past paper, right? This is 2014. I don't think they're going to ask you this particular one again, right? Because I don't even see the textbooks labeling this part over here. So apparently B is an endoplasmic reticulum. Just ignore part B, right? By the way, that's just a makeup for that question, right? Anybody can tell me what C is? But what is C supposed to be in the plant there? That's not the mitochondria. D is your mitochondria. You just can't miss it. The mitochondria just look like this, and just have little dashes inside of it. You can't miss him. Right. C is your chloroplast, right? So what is the function of part C? Chloroplast, right? But the chloroplast contains something called chlorophyll. And the whole point of chlorophyll, it absorbs sunlight, and that sunlight is used to make plant food. B is what? This one was D, sorry. D is the mitochondria, and you all have heard me talk about this a million and one times. They are the powerhouses of the cells. They create energy via a process called respiration. How much people got all correct? Forget this one here. I'm not concerned about this because I can't see this coming for your exam in the future. But how much people got everything else correct? This one correct, this one correct, and this one correct. That's an easy 3 marks in the exam. Daria, you got all, right? Don't feel bad about if you don't know what B is, right? Don't let that throw you off today. Right, so some people mix up C and D. Right, let's go. Right. You are required to view a virus and a plant cell. Oh, I like this question. This one actually gave me problems, a little bit of problems, and I actually had to do a little bit of research to get this one out. So you're looking at a virus and a plant cell. Name one feature that is common to both a virus and a plant cell. I found it was such a strange question. What's the only similarity between a virus and a plant cell? Go to your notes. At some point in your notes, I gave you a diagram of a virus and a bacteria. It should be on the same page. Go back in your notes and let me know in the chat if you can find a diagram of a virus in your notes. Let me know when you found it. The only real similarity between a virus and a plant cell is that they both contain DNA. That's the only similarity between the two of them, right? But then that's the only one that I could have found online. And I had to Google it, to be honest with you. It was such a strange question. Part 2. Suggest 2 differences that would be observed between a virus and the typical plant cell. Now, here's the thing, right? A virus and a plant cell only have one thing in common. So basically, everything else is different. So you could probably find 10 differences between what a virus and a plant cell. So I only came up with a couple, right? And of course, you all are you can put your answers on the chat, but I'm going to show you my answers now, right? I just chose these 2. Plant cells have a chloroplast and mitochondria, while a virus does not. Okay? Obviously, it have plenty other things you could have stated, but I just chose these 2. Right? So a virus doesn't have a chloroplast or a mitochondria. Right? So let's move on. Right? And also a virus is not considered to be alive. A plant cell is considered to be alive. So yes, that is another difference. Right? Right, so good luck with this one. I think you all can more than handle this one. So C, part 2 and part 3. I don't expect anyone to get this one wrong. C, part 1. Right? Oh, I made a small mistake here. That's all. For part 1, obviously, I put the wrong thing there. It's supposed to be a nerve cell. That's a nerve. I'm not too sure why I have that there. This is well, you shouldn't call it a nerve. It starts with the letter N, but the real word is a neuron. The reason you can't put a nerve, remember I had explained the simple difference between a neuron and a nerve. A neuron is when you combine a nerve is when you combine a whole set of neurons. So nerve is like plural in a sense. Neuron is singular. So to get full marks in the exam, you need to put neuron. Now, I believe I had explained what are differentiated and undifferentiated cells. Differentiated, are specialized cells in the body. They basically have one purpose. Like, for example, the W up here is a white blood cell. Anybody wants to tell me what kind of white blood cell is that? Is that a phagocyte or is that a lymphocyte? Look at the diagram. Is it a phagocyte or a lymphocyte? If you notice, it's doing something. If you look at it properly, you will see something in its mouth. It's a phagocyte, correct. This here is the bad bacteria now, and the phagocyte is eating it. So that's like its mouth there. So a white blood cell has a specific function. Doesn't it fight off infections? That's its specific function. X is a sperm cell. A sperm cell has a specific function. It's used in the reproduction process. Neurons have a specific function. They transmit electrical signals from one part of the body to the other part of the body. So when something has a specific function or a cell develops so that it only has one specific function, they are called differentiated cells. Undifferentiated cells are not special cells. They're usually something called stem cells. Stem cells, right, are generic cells. They don't have a specific function as yet. But don't get me wrong. Stem cells could grow up one day to become a differentiated cell, a cell with a specific purpose, right? So undifferentiated don't have a specific purpose as yet, and they're usually called stem cells. All right, so not much people got both correct, but at least you all know the answer now, so don't feel too bad. All right, so let's move on. All right, it's our friend Jibby again. So above we spoke about, I have plenty spelling errors here. I only put this together this morning, right? Above we spoke about a virus, right? I wonder if the examiner will ever ask us to compare a virus with a bacteria. By now, we know a virus and a bacteria are different. A virus is not considered alive, and a bacteria is considered alive. But it have plenty other differences. How much of you all found this diagram in your notes? I gave you all this a long time ago, probably about 2 to 3 months ago. This is how the diagram of a virus looks, and this is how the diagram of a bacteria looks. You can see it looks completely different, right? Right, so just some facts here about bacteria, right? Most bacteria do not need, bacteria do not need a host to reproduce. So if this bacteria wanted to duplicate itself, it can do it on its own. It doesn't have to be inside another organism in order to do it. And a lot of bacteria can produce energy without a mitochondria, right? A lot of people think that all living organisms need a mitochondria to perform respiration, to produce energy. That is simply not true. A lot of bacteria do not even have a mitochondria, but they have other mechanisms they can use to produce energy. Don't worry, the examiner is not going to ask you what are the other mechanisms to produce energy in a bacteria, right? Also in a bacteria, right? A lot of bacteria, right? Well, all bacteria do not really have a nucleus. You know an animal cell, right? Let me just draw an animal cell here. Inside the animal cell, there's a nucleus. We all know inside, by now, inside the nucleus has the chromosomes, it has the DNA. And for those who did the homework, the heredity homework, right? The DNA and whatnot, or the chromosomes, I'm going to put DNA chromosomes live inside of the nucleus. Bacteria does not have a nucleus. So look at this diagram. There's not a single nucleus inside of there. Instead, the chromosomes or the DNA, they just live in little strands, but they are not inside of a nucleus, right? So in other words, they don't really have a house. The house is the nucleus. And also it has some extra DNA that floats around in it other than the main DNA, and that's called plasmid DNA, right? Right. By the way, where the main strand of DNA is located, right? And you see this little region, they don't call it a nucleus. They call it what? A nucleoid. That's different from a nucleus. If this question were to come in the exam, what's the purpose of the flagellum and the pilus? Well, what's the purpose of those two things? The flagellum and the pilus. Let me know on the chat. All right. So the question was, well, what does the pilus and the flagellum do? These two things, well, especially the flagellum. The flagellum is like the tail, right? It helps it to swim around, just like how a whale or a dolphin has a tail, is to help it swim around. Now, the pilus also are like small arms. They can also help it to what? Swim around. So the pilus and the flagellum basically helps the bacteria to move about. But the pilus has another function. These are like small arms, like I mentioned. So it could help it swim, or couldn't it be used to grip on to other objects? So the pilus, other than helping with the swimming function, it can be used to grip on probably to other bacteria. Probably there's another bacteria close to it, and the bacteria wants to hold on to the other bacteria. So it will use the pilus for that. Right? Just like how you would use your arms to hold on to someone else. Okay? Now, one thing about a virus, right? For a virus to copy itself or to duplicate itself, it cannot do it on its own. A virus needs a host. It needs to be hooked on to something else or be inside of another organism, right? To reproduce. Right, so that's just a brief refresher on the differences between a virus and a bacteria. Good luck with D and E. Send your answers on the chat, please. I think on the first day of class in September, we had mentioned that all living things, right, display, for it to be classified as living, it has to be doing 7 things. Don't worry, a few slides down the road, I'm going to refresh your memory on the 7 things, right? But this is my choice from the 7, right? They ask us for 3, but I put 4, right? Movement, respiration, sensitivity, and nutrition, right? Now for part E, we had discussed this question last term as well. A fire seems to be living, a flame, right? And this is one of those questions that philosophers throw on you. They challenge you, right? A flame has the same characteristics as a living organism. Like, for example, all living things grow. A flame can grow, right? A flame can get larger and larger and larger. Also, we eat, right? All living things must eat. Well, you can put the idea forward that a flame also eats, because a flame needs what? Fuel. Like if you have a fire and you throw gas into it, won't the flame get what? Larger by utilizing the gas? So some philosophers will say the flame is eating the gas, and when it eats the gas, it gets larger. Also, all living things move, right? Don't all living things display some sort of movement? Doesn't a flame move? When you see a flame, it kind of beats from side to side. So philosophers will challenge you and say, hey, a flame is technically alive. Now, it's really, really, really hard to fight that argument, right? Because we all know a flame is not alive. So if you go online, right, let us let you go online. There's a ton of debate on this particular topic, but this is what I want you to put for the exam. The simplest argument against it is that all living things must have at least one cell. All living things, even down to a bacteria. A bacteria is the simplest form of life. Does a flame have a cell? The answer is no. And that is what I want you to put for the exam if this question comes. Everybody okay with that? Right? This will give you your marks. You don't have to worry. You will win with this one. All right, so let's move on. Ah, this one here, participation punishment, guys. I came up with three people who, I think I came up with three people, so you all can read the punishment there. Anybody wants a volunteer for this one? Anybody wants a volunteer? I'll take one volunteer for this particular punishment. You all can have a read there, right? But you can challenge me if I'm wrong. If I call your name and I am wrong, you can challenge me on it, right? So I believe, how can you pronounce this? Anna, and I don't know how to pronounce that name. Avalon, I don't think I got any responses from you. And Zahara, right? But does anybody want this punishment? This seems like a very fun punishment. Anybody, any volunteers for it? Elizabeth, well, Otley, you volunteered, right? Why not? Josiah, yeah, you. If there was a fifth name to go, I would put your name. All right, guys. So the first three names, try to participate in class, and guys, try to participate. Past papers is the most important part. This is where you test yourself and you push yourself, right? Let's go. All right, so we're on finally on question 3, right? Look in the upper right-hand corner there. Send your answers on the chat, please. Now, A is obviously your liver, right? So now the liver has plenty functions. So for the liver, this is what I put. The liver filters all of the blood in the body, right? And breaks down poisonous substances such as alcohol and drugs, right? So your liver helps to remove toxins from your body. So one person mentioned that it helps to remove toxins. So that's also correct. Also, the liver also makes something called bile, right? Bile helps to break down fats. Like when you eat fatty foods, the bile will help break down the fats. Now, a lot of people think, and I'm going to point to something over here. What's the name of that structure that kind of lives underneath, or kind of, it's kind of, the liver kind of encloses it? That's the gallbladder. Well, this is here, put gallbladder. I want to point out something that a lot of people mistake. The gallbladder does not make bile. The liver makes the bile, but it stores it in the gallbladder. So the gallbladder is more of a storage unit for the bile the liver made. Okay, so don't ever mix that up. Also, I mentioned, well, you can see it on the screen here, that the liver helps break down alcohol and drugs. The liver is also known for making a toxic substance starting with U. Anybody could refresh my memory on what that toxic substance is? the liver helps to make something that's toxic that starts with the letter U. Great, you all remembered. So let's point it here. Urea. The liver makes something called urea, but obviously the liver just doesn't decide to make urea because urea is bad. Just refreshing your memory. Whenever you eat too much protein, the excess protein, your liver will break it down to urea. And of course, it will send the urea to your kidneys and then you urinate it out, right? So just remember, urea is created from excess protein when they eat too much proteins. So let's see what part B is about. B is the esophagus, right? I know esophagus is spelled two different ways, with the O and without the O, right? Right now, I cannot remember which one is the English spelling. I'll clarify that for next week. One is the American spelling and one is the British spelling. We obviously need to use the British spelling, right? And what does it do? Obviously, when you eat food, right, the esophagus is connected to your stomach. So when you swallow, it goes through the esophagus into your stomach. So that one was easy. That one was easy, right? And I don't think I saw any wrong answers, so that's good. Let's move on. Have fun with part B here. So the pancreas is one of the most important organs when it comes to digestion. You see, the pancreas produces three types of enzymes. Three. It produces carbohydrates, which obviously is used to help digest carbohydrates. Then it have proteases, which help to what? Digest proteins. And it also produces lipase, which helps to what? Break down fats, right? Lipids, right? So if your pancreas cannot produce this pancreatic juice, right? It cannot break down proteins, carbohydrates, or fats, but they only ask you for one, right? So I don't know which one I put. Which one did I put? I put proteins, right? So obviously you could have put carbohydrates and you could have put fats. State one effect that a deficiency of the group named in one. So I choose protein. So let's say that your body cannot break down proteins. Now, if your body cannot break down the proteins, it cannot absorb the proteins. So you end up with a protein deficiency, right? There are plenty things that can happen here. I put a whole list here, right? Obviously, your muscles itself, it needs protein to grow and repair itself. So obviously, if you cannot absorb proteins, your muscles are going to be compromised, right? But proteins have plenty other functions in the body. Proteins are actually used to make other enzymes. You see all of these enzymes here are made from proteins. So if your body not getting any proteins, you're not going to be able to make any enzymes in the future. Antibodies like white blood cells and the things white blood cells make to help fight off infections, they are made from proteins, right? The healing of wounds. Let's say you get a cut on your knee or a cut on your elbow. You need protein to repair that cut, right? Number 4, right? Providing energy when carbohydrate and fat intake is inadequate. Let me explain this one, right? I want to take my time with this one. When your body needs energy, right? The first thing your body burns is the carbohydrates, right? I'll put C for carbohydrates. When all the carbohydrates run out in your body, what does your body take to make energy? Because remember, carbohydrates have glucose, right? And you need glucose in what? The respiration process. But let's say you're stranded on an island and all the carbohydrates in your body are used up, what will your body turn to next to create energy? It has a backup process. What nutrition? It will use fats, correct, FATS. So, but here's the thing. After it uses up all the fat, remember you're on a deserted island, right? So it used up all the carbohydrates. It went to the backup. So it used up all the fats in your body. The last thing the body will try to use to create energy is the proteins. And remember, your muscles have a lot of protein in it. So your body will begin to feed off its own muscles to create energy to try to stay alive. Okay? Obviously, you don't ever want your body to reach that point, right? Where it feeds off it. Your body basically begins to eat its own self to stay alive. All right, so let's move on. Right? So, and again, that's why a lot of people who are undergoing starvation, right, begin to lose so much weight because first your body begins to burn the fats, so you begin to lose weight. Well, some people don't have a problem with that. They actually look forward to that, right? But you can't let it reach the protein stage. Of course, when your body begins to eat away its own muscles, you get even lighter. But that's dangerous, right? You can die from that. You don't ever want that to happen. Ever, ever. Right? Right. Good luck with part C. It has a part 1 and a part 2. If you look carefully, you will see part 1 down here. Good luck. Now, starch is a type of carbohydrate. It's a complex carbohydrate. For your body to break down carbohydrates, it needs a specific category of enzymes. And we just learned it from the previous slide. It's carbohydrates. Now, remember, carbohydrates is a category of enzymes that break down carbohydrates only. And there are many different types of carbohydrates in the body. Amylase just happens to be one type of carbohydrates. And it's good at breaking down starch, which is a type of carbohydrate, as I mentioned. However, remember, these are enzymes, right? Carbohydrates and amylase are enzymes. Enzymes are special proteins and they need a specific temperature to survive, right? Usually, enzymes live at 37 degrees Celsius at normal body temperature. You see, when the temperature gets more than 40 degrees, it will destroy enzymes. So in other words, enzymes cannot survive when the temperature is more than 40 degrees Celsius. So in the first test tube, it's starch plus amylase at a normal temperature at 37 degrees. So I think in test tube 1, it will break down the starch because the amylase is at 37 degrees Celsius. However, in test tube 2, they boiled the amylase first, which means if you boil something, it reaches 100 degrees Celsius. So the amylase here would be destroyed. So if the amylase is destroyed, it cannot break down the starch. And in the third test tube, they just put the starch in the water with no carbohydrates, with no amylase in it. Water cannot break down starch on its own. It needs the amylase in order to do that. So the starch will not be broken down in test tube 3. So the answer for this one is test tube 1, obviously. And here's my explanation why. Right? It's the same thing that I just said. I just put it in worded form. And over here, just for revision purposes, these are the properties of enzymes and their properties. This is a table you have to learn off by heart, and you already have this table but give it a read and let me know when you're finished with everything on the screen.